Ombudsman.
Let's bring in right now the chairman of the Republican National Committee, incoming chief of staff to the White House, Reince Priebus. Reince, thank you so much for being with us, and we want to congratulate you on that seal behind you. It is quite bold.
That's kind of cool.
It's very, very bold, and it just screams authority. We thank you for being there.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on the show.
All right, so let's talk about the issue that we just reported on and that we're talking about with Nick. What is the president-elect's plans to talk about divestment or getting rid of some of the conflicts of interest he might have, and why did he delay his press conference?
Well, first of all, one of the reasons is we're in the middle of pretty huge announcements, as you guys have been talking about this morning, regarding the Secretary of State, other cabinet positions, and also, you know, it's not also the easiest thing to do. I mean, when you have massive real estate holdings and you need to find a way to extract yourself from all of that, it takes a lot of time. And the one thing I can assure everyone on the panel is that people aren't just sitting around and doing nothing about this. There are multiple meetings and every single day with a lot of lawyers and making sure that government ethics are followed and that the best decisions are being made as to who and how the business is going to be run moving forward. This is not the easiest thing. It's also something that the American people embraced, and one of the reasons I believe Donald Trump won the election, putting aside, I think, the messaging and what he did across the country and, 25,000 people showing up everywhere he went, the debates, all of that. Put that aside. People also elected Donald Trump because he was extremely successful, and he never hid his success. And so that's something that people voted for, and I don't think we're backing off from that. But what we are doing is making sure that the things that you're all worried about are put to an end and eliminated as best as possible under very complicated circumstances that I think you'll all be pleased with once all of it gets sorted out.
So, is it under consideration? Is it I guess understood that there is massive complications with the kids taking over?
Well, I don't know about that, Mika. I mean, look, I think when you're working through government ethics and you are finding ways to minimize any sort of conflicts of interest, it's just everything's on the table. And the thing I can tell you is that we don't want. Why would we want problems and conflict? We don't, and neither does President-elect Trump. He doesn't want it. He doesn't want to deal with problems and conflicts. He wants to deal with the American people and this huge job of leading our country at a very, I think, some would say very difficult time. I mean, we've got to get the economy going. We've got ISIS. We've got problems all over the world. That's what he cares about. He's not sitting around thinking about, retail businesses, around the country. So we know this is something that we've got to deal with, and I want to just assure you all we are.
Yeah, really.
Reince, it's Willie. Guys, good to see you this morning. Let me ask you about the choice of Rex Tillerson to be Secretary of State, the nominee. What was the advantage in the end that he had over Mitt Romney, if you believe that Romney was the last 2 or 3 candidates? Why Tillerson over Romney?
Well, I mean, number one, it comes down to chemistry. Governor Romney is impressive, but so is so many of the others that we talked to, Mayor Giuliani, David Petraeus, Bob Corker. But at the end, it was a massive, it was chemistry, it was presence, it was vision. It was also the ability that Rex Tillerson had to maintain relationships across the world in many places that aren't the easiest places to have relationships in during many different administrations. So obviously he's very good at being a diplomat, and someone like him is a diplomat that happens to be able to drill oil. And the good Lord didn't put oil in all freedom-loving democracies across the world, and yet Rex Tillerson was able to make this work. And Donald Trump and Rex Tillerson, they hit it off, and they have a similar vision of how to get things done, and that's really what did it, Willie.
A lot of concerns, obviously, about Russia, a lot of concerns about the fact that Donald Trump has said things that many believe, his critics believe, make him too cozy with Vladimir Putin. Obviously, Rex Tillerson received an award, a friendship award with Russia in 2014, and many have suggested that him being a, quote, friend of Vladimir Putin is not comforting. What do you say to those critics and those concerns?
Yeah, I don't know why having relationships with people that would otherwise be potentially difficult is a bad thing. That's a huge advantage. Other people have won this award, by the way. I mean, astronauts, athletes, other Americans, musicians. It's people that have done things to help relationships between Russia and places around the world, and he's done that, but not because he just decided one day to wake up and say, oh, I want to have a relationship with Vladimir Putin. He actually had work to do in Russia and drilling and exploring oil fields throughout Russia, and he did it, and he struck great deals. And look, if you're going to have peace around the world, we've got to understand that ignoring people and acting as though people don't exist is not the way to get it done. Ronald Reagan didn't do that. I mean, Ronald Reagan didn't ignore Mikhail Gorbachev. He didn't ignore communist countries around the world. He talked to them. He worked with them. There was diplomacy. Henry Kissinger didn't ignore China and Russia. He talked to people. And Donald Trump didn't make a secret about this. President-elect Trump said throughout the entire campaign, in debates, at the most critical times, yeah, I'm going to talk to people. I'm going to have relationships, and I'm actually going to get something done, because what's been happening in the past isn't working. Are we better off today across the world with ISIS and Libya and Syria? Are we really trying to argue that the way we used to do things is working? It's not.
All right, Elise.
Chairman Priebus, as an executive, Rex Tillerson has supported lifting sanctions against Russians and Russian officials that are involved in the incursion in Crimea. What will he support as Secretary of State? Will he support lifting sanctions on Russian officials?
Well, what he said was that the sanctions were ineffective, but the reason they were ineffective was that they weren't being enforced. And so his point was, unless you're going to enforce these sanctions, they're not effective. And people are looking at the first part of that statement and not the second. Look, I know where Rex Tillerson is on this. He believes that sanctions and the threat of sanctions are an important part of international strategy and diplomacy, and so he's not against sanctions. I just want to assure you of that. But what he is against is setting up sanctions that aren't enforced. He was not for the Iran deal, by the way, and he was very clear about it. He didn't think that that was a good product, and he didn't think it would put America first, and ultimately that's what it's all about. President-elect Trump wakes up every day, put America first, Americans first, and this is what he's thinking about. And I think with the whole team that's being put together, we're going to have an extraordinary cabinet that can represent the United States across the world.
Okay, Nick?
Well, Chairman, just to follow up, is the President-elect's view that we should keep the sanctions in place or not?
Well, that's something, look, here's what I would say. I'm not prepared to outline our foreign policy to you.
So we're not sure right now.
Well, but here's what I would tell you. If you're going to have sanctions in place, they need to be enforced. That I can tell you for sure is something that he believes in. And as far as where that product goes next, you have to just wait and see. I mean, we're just getting our cabinet put together now. And as I think President-elect outlined many times over the last 6 weeks, sitting down with our generals, sitting down with our leadership, formulating our policy and revealing that to the American people will be the first order of business.
John Bolton, is he in consideration for Deputy Secretary of State?
Well, look, I mean, I think everything's in consideration, Mika.
Yeah, but like,
we're not eliminating people, and I'm certainly not going to announce the elimination of folks right now. But
why don't you start here?
We will give you a whiteboard the next time you come. You can just draw a line through names in real time.
But here's right. But here's the thing. I mean, you know that President-elect Trump, and I know you all speak frequently, and Rex Tillerson and others in the entire team are going to sit down with Vice President-elect Pence and make those decisions. And they're coming soon, but not imminent.
So, Chairman, let me ask you one more thing. When the CIA leak came out, when the reports came out that they thought that the election had been influenced by the Russians, Donald Trump put out a statement that said these are the same people that said Saddam had weapons of mass destruction. Sean Spicer, the spokesman for you at the RNC, suggested that there were some people in the intelligence services upset by the outcome of the election that may be pushing a personal agenda. So does the President-elect believe that the CIA and intelligence services are playing politics here, that they're acting in their own self-interest and they're pushing a personal agenda rather than looking out for the greater good of the country?
Well, look, let me just say this. No, he totally respects and admires the men and women that work for the CIA.
It didn't sound like it in that statement, Chairman.
Well, here's the thing. We can't figure it out. I'm just telling you the truth. I'm sort of just speaking for myself. I don't understand where some of this stuff comes from in regard to if you're me and you're chairman of the Republican National Committee, and the New York Times puts out an article that says there were 2 sets of emails, essentially. There was 2 hackings that occurred, the RNC and the DNC. And the Russians, so they say, chose to only use the DNC emails in order to help Donald Trump and hurt Hillary Clinton. My problem with all of this is that the whole premise is wrong, because the RNC was never hacked. Now, RNC, as we've been told by the FBI, was probed. The Russians never got into the RNC system. So I'm spending all weekend trying to beat back a story that is premised on something that's totally untrue. Now, the question I have is, well, how did that possibly get out there? Who put it out there? What intelligence agencies put it out there? And now we find out that these agencies don't agree with each other on what I'm even talking about.
But Chairman, the man who's going to be president in a month came out and said the CIA is the same organization that brought you the Iraq War. Don't listen to these guys. Does he believe they're pushing a political agenda? I'll read it to you again. These are the same people that said Saddam had weapons of mass destruction.
Well, number one, that is true, but that doesn't translate into I don't respect the men and women that work there. He totally does. But I do think that leadership and direction and vision matter, and I think that's something that we're going to work on, and President-elect Trump's going to work on. And look, whoever's leaking to the press shouldn't be leaking to the press. I hope you would at least agree with me that people in these agencies should not be leaking information to the press. That's a problem, right? So something isn't right, and that has to end.
Well, but do you believe, though, the CIA is pushing a political agenda, that there's a personal agenda behind this leak?
Well, when you say the CIA, that's a, look,
people within the CIA,
some entity,
right.
Someone. I mean, why else would why would there be an article that says the RNC and the DNC were hacked and therefore all these things happened and now we have this conclusion, if the whole premise of that entire thought process is based on something that isn't true, leaked by someone in those agencies? I think something's not right. I mean, I understand your concern, but I wish there was a little concern going the other direction that said, this isn't a proper way to proceed,
right.
and it's not appropriate.
All right, Reince Priebus, thank you for being with us. We know that you have a window that we agreed to beforehand, and that we've blown through that window. We apologize for that.
It's fine, guys.
Let's talk about the Packers now. Thank you, Reince Priebus. We'll let you go.
See you guys.
All right. So